Thank you very much for joining us here today, Darin. ClearDATA is possibly the nation's fastest growing healthcare cloud computing company. The theme of this conference is Ideas Connected. So can you start by telling us how you came to have this idea and how you've implemented it?
Sure. So it's been kind of a 20-year journey for me to get to this. Consider us a late-stage startup, but probably one of the most meaningful startups in my career. I spent the last 20-plus years in the Silicon Valley tech ecosystem, first 6 years in the venture capital business, and then joined the serial entrepreneur startup camp. And so this is my fourth startup. The other three were all in the cloud computing space. So we're bringing kind of cloud computing plus additional layers of healthcare-related solutions to healthcare. And my journey to healthcare comes from a lot of nagging from my family. My dad's a surgeon, my brother's a doctor, uncles are doctors, and they've been asking me for years to get back in the family fold and focus on healthcare IT. And I had looked over the last 10 years at trying to do something in healthcare, but it just wasn't the right timing. It was kind of antiquated systems, and they were quite happy with the paper systems. And Obamacare came and infused $30 billion into the market to switch to the digital realm through EMR. And it looked like the stars were aligning, that finally the kind of healthcare IT head fakes were over. And we're going to see some meaningful adoption of IT technology. And so that's when I decided it's a good time to get into healthcare. And that was about 2010, 11. Mm-hmm. So kind of brainstorming sessions with my parents and healthcare practitioners on what are the big problems in healthcare today. And I came across a rather stunning statistic that felt like I had high relevancy background that could bring to solving this one of the biggest problems. And it's probably not well known here. It's the third most massive health issue in America. And I'd probably ask you, most people aren't aware of this, but how many people do you think go to see their physician because they're sick or they're hurt or have some affliction and end up dying from some unrelated medical error? What do you think that number is?
Great. I thought I was interviewing today.
Yes, I'm not very good.
I have no idea off the top of my head. I imagine it would not be that big, though.
Yeah, you would imagine it's not that big, but it is the number 3 killer behind cancer and heart disease. It's 400,000 people a year.
Wow.
It's over 1,000 people a day.
Wow.
That's the equivalent of 2 747s crashing every day or a 9/11 event.
That's incredible.
Every 3 years. It is. It is not that well known because it's a local distributed. It's been hard to get at the data, but they recently got at the data, and this is, DC. Everyone sort of is focused on how do we solve this, and what they determined was most of this is because of the lack of advanced IT technologies and applications. And of course, that was the sign for me that said this is, we can bring what we've done for other industries and apply here. And really drive solutions that can solve for that. And so, one of the mantras that we have that I love is healthcare, at least today, is less of a science problem. It's more of an information problem. And so we looked at how can we have an impact on this and save lives. And so we built ClearDATA is exclusive to the healthcare market. The healthcare market is a $3 trillion a year industry, about a $65 billion healthcare IT spend market. And we, fortunately for me, because I've been building cloud computing companies for the last 17 years, and again, this is maybe my fourth. The other 3 all were venture-backed, and they went public, and so we were able to get good financial sponsors for this project as well. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's the right solution set to solve for this big problem. And we built a healthcare cloud computing platform that combines information security and health data management with it. And the platform is really designed to solve for 3 big industry problems that will help solve this massive health issue. And that is the first, before the industry can truly meaningfully adopt IT, advanced technologies and web applications, you need to modernize and fix the infrastructure. The infrastructure is aged. It's compounded by constraints around capital and personnel.
Yeah.
And so we can come in and modernize it, pull that infrastructure into a high-performance, centralized, reliable, scalable model at less cost.
I'm just going to interrupt briefly because I want to highlight this point because I found it fascinating talking to you beforehand. You said that ClearDATA wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago. That the money, I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds of Obamacare because I found it's the best way to ruin a polite conversation.
And I'm an independent. I'm an independent, let's be clear about that.
But I think that one part of it that hasn't been highlighted a lot is this $30 billion you say has been put aside to improve the technology infrastructure around the country. Is that right?
Correct. I think when people think of Obamacare, they think of the emotional aspects of it, the insurance and so on. Mm-hmm. But there was a very wise move, which is when they came to the realization that 1,000 people a day were dying, and then they came to the realization that that's because the information flow was not there. It's highly siloed data environments. They took $28 billion, set it aside, and provided kind of a carrot and stick model that said within the next 5 years you need to adopt electronic medical record systems, moving from a paper society to a digital society. In the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen it go from kind of a 30% or less digital, mainly paper, to upwards of 50, 60% adoption of EMR. Now, they're not fully functional EMR, but just in 3 or 4 years, it's been, and that's what's helping drive a lot of our growth, is this massive wave of an adoption of EMR. And that's causing all kinds of replacement across the board in terms of going back to many of there's 3,000 plus software companies in healthcare. Many of them are client server on-premise, on-site, because it's kind of it's been a highly fragmented, aged industry from an IT perspective. And so now providers are going back to their software companies saying, give us something in the cloud. As we're going through this transformation, we want to kind of leapfrog into the next century here.
So what are the main problems that you've encountered so far in your first few years? I mean, there must be a lot of inertia, a lot of people quite opposed to change in an industry that has been so unchanged or so untouched in some ways by technology for so long. Yeah. What are the main problems that you've encountered?
So as an entrepreneur, startup entrepreneur, one of the first things you do when you're architecting the execution plan is you just do a ton of diligence on the market timing. So you do a lot of customer ride-alongs to find out where their psychology is and the complacency and the buy cycles. And in particular in healthcare IT, there's been a lot of well-intended, well-funded healthcare IT companies that have ended up in this graveyard because they were too early and that there weren't the right market drivers. And finally, there's enough market drivers here to change the buy cycles. And so to me, that was one of the big problems is how do we short circuit this 36-month traditional sales cycle? And we've been able to do that because I think the tide is rising and we've cracked the code on our sales model in terms of the way that we're selling value, and the reduction in IT cost leads to reduction in patient care costs and improvement in patient care.
Talk to me a little bit more about that. I'm very interested in that, your sort of approach to sales in this industry.
So our sales model is fairly straightforward. It's direct field sales for large providers and mid-market and channel and lead gen, demand gen through online where the discovery is happening. But our sales process is, healthcare is a unique industry.
Yep.
Everyone in the industry wants to provide great care. And so technology has not been a means to that end in many other than the devices. And so our goal is to convince them that with our platform, we can unify the technology. We can take applications that are, tremendous data silo, inefficient environment where oftentimes providers and large healthcare systems will have anywhere from a couple hundred to 3,000 different applications, most of which don't talk to one another. So the more that we can pull those applications and storage onto our platform, in a high-performance centralized platform, and then apply health data management techniques where we can help to organize, extract, harmonize that data, then they can become wildly more efficient on the way that they provide patient care, and that point of care ability to run analytics at the time that they're meeting with a customer would be unheard of 4 or 5 years ago. We're on the brink of making that happen over the next couple of years. And our business, we believe strongly that we're kind of the impetus for this change. You've got to fix that infrastructure, and in the process, you've got to protect and securitize that data there's just tremendous breach tremors within healthcare where they're almost paralyzed by the fact that 80% of, and healthcare has all these extra regulatory compliance and HIPAA and PHI concerns around security. So you've got to be able to secure it. You've got to convince them that you can get them compliant, keep them compliant, and protect and securitize that data. And then over time, help them organize and get access and share that data with their physicians and the end customers. So our platform speaks to those three problems that we're solving. And so when we communicate to the customer, that's our sales pitch, is let's help first fix the infrastructure so that you're not stuck in the mud here on trying to add new technology, so that you have the true agility to do what you need to do to add in web applications.
And do you always have this bigger picture in mind? I mean, it's great to see the linkage between the technology and the end result. You say that the problem in healthcare is not a science problem, it's an information problem, and you're talking about how your end goal almost is to try and save some of these 1,000 lives a day that are being lost. Can you talk to me a little bit about the culture of your company? How, you seem quite passionate talking about it here on this stage now. Is that infused throughout the company? Is everybody aware of what the end goal is, or the sort of bigger picture? How important is culture to ClearDATA?
I say this to my executive team. Culture eats strategy for breakfast and lunch in a startup. So to us, it's who we are. We have a very rigorous, and part of how you help guide and build the culture is having a very rigorous recruiting process. And so we'll combine top grades with who, and we've generated our own recruiting process, and then that helps weed out those that are just kind of looking for a safe 9-to-5. We're a fast-moving startup that has very idealistic view of we're going to change the world, and we're going to do that by becoming a major change agent in healthcare, and we've already done that over the last couple of years. And we can show examples of how we've reduced healthcare IT costs and improved patient care, and so we're very much of a passion on purpose company, and I think that comes out in our company in the way that we treat our customers.
How do you ensure that that does flow from the top down? How do you ensure that everyone in the company does share that culture?
So we have a town hall. We have traditional monthly town hall meetings. We've got two senior staff meetings a week, and we always start off with, let's remind our folks that you can easily get caught in the grind, but here's what we're doing. We're changing healthcare, and that will save lives. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a town hall meeting next week and off-site, and I always start with the 3 or 4 slides to remind everyone what our mission is, and then we try and bring in a couple of examples of how we changed healthcare in the last month.
You've already enjoyed some very big successes in your few years with ClearDATA. But you still say that you're kind of in the startup stage, like it's still the early days. What keeps you awake at night at the moment? What do you worry about?
Great question. It's make sure we get 100% growth for our investors. We're on track to do that again this year. We've had over 100% growth year over year for the last 3 years, and we've already got that in the bag for this year. But my disappointments if you were to say, what are the great wins and the disappointments? My disappointments are when we see customers who are trying to jump on the cloud bandwagon quickly, and they maybe go with another. We can't be everywhere all the time, so we're seeing providers maybe go with an Amazon or a Rackspace, someone that is a generalist and not a healthcare purpose, and they don't know about us yet. Yes. And once they realize that we're the longer-term best partner for them, so it's a shame when I see partners that our customers we can't get to, because then we can't meaningfully change healthcare the way that we hope to then save lives. I don't know if that keeps me awake at night, but
you seem well rested.
But it is something that I wish we could be everywhere with our message, and we're in that I call it a late stage startup. So we are over 100 people, and we are driving this message, and the message will be out there in a more pervasive way in the next couple of years.
Right, and you mentioned Amazon, and I want to talk a little bit about this. One of the biggest trends at the moment, one of the biggest shifts is towards cloud computing. Can you give us your perspective on that? What advantages does it bring? And obviously, healthcare is the angle that you can speak about it best from. What advantages does it bring? But what challenges does it bring? Like, if you're a big organization shifting to the cloud, what advice would you give to somebody in that position?
Sure. In particular for healthcare, because that's our focus, it's a very unique environment. Many other industries have adopted cloud at the 50% level, whether private, hybrid, or public.
Right.
Healthcare is down in the 10% or below, and mainly because they have capital and personnel constraints, and they're kind of drowning with just the EMR swap out, EMR 2.0, and so we're having to educate them on what the cloud is and even what questions to ask us. And that's part of what makes us unique, is we understand their constraints and the extra level of servicing and mapping we have to do to consider how to take over their IT infrastructure. And so their challenges are really what can be moved, when, how, what's the price, and what's the long-term concerns that they should have. So we have to educate them, we have to do migration analysis, then move them into our environment, and then layer on the additional security and health data management.
Talk to us about this client education process, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. How do you approach that?
We have what's called a CAMP, which is a Cloud Assessment, Migration, and Planning, where we'll come in if they're stuck on what to do. We'll come in and do the work for them. We'll fully assess their entire IT environment, from servers to storage to networking to security, and then come to them with a full-blown plan on what, how, when it should be moved. And
as somebody who doesn't work in this industry, is that something that you do before signing a contract or anything like that?
Yes.
That's a service you provide for free up front?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, fascinating. And we talked, myself and Chris talked quite a bit about security in the previous conversation. And I know in healthcare, that's a huge concern. Patient confidentiality obviously adds its own layers. Is there a bit of a trade-off between usability and security? How do you navigate that?
Yes, so much so that I think the healthcare industry has not stepped up to compliance. 80% of healthcare is out of compliance. And so the Office of National Coordination, the ONC, has 80%.
Wow.
80%. You know, it's a very heavy set of regulatory requirements. So we have developed a practice that solves kind of our gap analysis practice. We'll figure out where they are from a security perspective. We'll do what's called a security risk analysis, which is tailored for the healthcare industry that determines where they are on a compliance fold. And through cloud computing and our security services and products, we'll bring them up to compliance and help police that for them and put policies and procedures in place. And that's part of what we offer. And the more CIOs I meet with, the more paralyzed they look about their comments are, everyone around this table gets fired. When I ask them what's going to keep you awake for the next through 2015, we'll have a great session. Then I ask that question at the end, and progressively we're hearing that now that we've had to open up our doors to healthcare is consumerizing. So the social engagement of everything is happening. It's happening in healthcare, and so they're having to add. And part of the regulatory requirement is that they have a certain level of their businesses run through a patient portal, a consumer portal. Mm-hmm. And now that's opened up the kind of closed four walls that they've had for many years. And there's a lot of breach zones. And so they feel exposed in a meaningful way to the point where they're telling a vendor, we know the hackers are just beginning to focus on healthcare. They're realizing that data is 10 times more valuable than other data. And we're just seeing early days of that. And so they're kind of paranoid and paralyzed about what to do, and our solution reduces breach zones by about 75% because it's in a closed cloud computing, reduces a lot of on-prem security exposure. So we're seeing that healthcare will be massive consumers of security over the next 2 years as HIPAA breach fines go up, as hackers start to focus on it, and so we're building strategies to have layered. We already have multiple layers beyond any other provider of security and services, and we'll continue to add more third-party services into that stack and offer them kind of the risk level of mitigation that they can afford.
So that obviously provides a lot of growth potential for ClearDATA. We've got time for one more question, and I want to just touch on healthcare has probably been one of the biggest national conversations in the US over the past few years. I moved here, I think, 5 years ago now, and it's constantly in the headlines, and everybody's talking about it. Can you let us know, for anybody who may have to deal with the healthcare industry over the next years, anyone who's looking to operate in that area, what's the general tone? How are people reacting to this? This is one of the biggest disruptions that's happening to any industry in the country. How are people responding, and how do you help them cope with that shift, that disruption?
From a customer perspective?
Yes.
It's a great question. They are having, it depends on the size of the customer, but typically, their biggest concern is we don't have the agility. We can't do what we need to get done. Can you help us there? So our biggest, thinking of sales, the audience here, our primary sales focus is really understanding the problem they're trying to solve today. Then once you can solve for that, tell us about your next 4 quarters. What are your ambitions? What are your pain points for the next 4 quarters? And then we roadmap as much as we can with them on that model. So I think that is the way that we approach it. And in addition to that, and maybe this applies to Juniper too, that there's I call it the 40-60 rule. 40% is technology products. You better score high on the price performance matrix and have a really good roadmap. But the other 60-70% is you're selling a relationship.
Right.
And particularly for Juniper, when we ran the analysis, they scored high on the product, and now where do they stay on the relationship? Are they going to treat the customers the way we treat our customers? Do they have remarkable servicing? Do they have operational excellence? Are they going to go the extra mile for us? Are they going to stay on that phone for 24 hours if we need them to? So exuding that in your kind of fabric of your company and then expressing that in your sales pitch is really important for us.
This idea of relationship.
Yeah, so it's very much of a value sell and relationship sell these days, and in particular for cloud companies where you're taking over their IT infrastructure. We try not to get them to think about bits, bytes, cloud hosting. We are taking over their IT infrastructure, and then we're going to securitize it, and we're going to help them organize, normalize, and harmonize that data so they can get to it.
Great. Darin, this has been a great conversation. I'm afraid we can't go on any longer.
No, that's all right.
Please, everyone, welcome me in thanking Darin for such a
Thank you.